Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 16th of June 2023. Let's get straight to the frontline, go to the northeast sector, the Kupiansk to Svatva to Kreminna front line here. As you can see on the war map we have Kupiansk up here in the north, Svatva in the middle, and then Kreminna down the south there. On my map, that looks rather like this. I've updated my Andrew Perpetua versus Syriac maps map. Thank you so much to JR, who's helping me out in doing this. He's done all the Syriac map lines updating. Andrew Perpetua's got a new map system that he's using. And I don't know whether he's changed the mapping, whether I've misinterpreted anything, but it seems like the Russian lines are a lot further back. That could just be, I mean, this is just rejigging maps as there's no movement or anything. This area could much better be understood as grey zone. But anyway, there seems to be quite a difference between the Ukrainian lines and the two mappers and their Russian lines north of Svatva. So just to remind you, Andrew Perpetua is a pro-Ukrainian mapper, and his Russian defensive lines are in blue, and Syriac maps is a pro-Russian mapper. Russian defensive lines are in red. Not a lot of activity happening, basically, up and down this front line. A little bit of a claim of Stelmakivka activity, repelled attack there. The ISW, Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, says Russian sources claimed on June 14th, so that's 2 days ago, that elements of the 6th Combined Arms Army conducted assaults in the direction of Kupiansk, and that Russian forces continue to maintain a bridgehead on the west bank of the Oskil River. That's a right bank. Left and right are as the river flows, so in the direction of the flow. Oskil River near Maziativka. Okay, so let's just have a little look there quickly. We have the Oskil River that comes down here, and it kind of separates the Ukrainians from the Russians here, the Oskil River, all the way down there. Ukrainians on this side, Russians on this side. And there could be that they have a foothold on the west side, on the right bank, which is actually on our left of the river here, somewhere near Maziativka. The issue is that these are bluffs here. I mean, it's likely to be somewhere like this, where it's lower ground. Otherwise, you know, they are having to climb up some cliffs there. Could be over here on this lower ground. If they have indeed some purchase there on that bank. Otherwise, nothing really to report until we come all the way down, I guess, to Bakhmut. We come past Bilahorivka, but I haven't heard any mention of that particularly. And the ISW, it's right down into Bakhmut again. So really quiet up and down the fronts, apart from the obviously the southern front and the Bakhmut, Adiivka, and Marinka. Okay, so Bakhmut there is apparently territorial gain for the Ukrainians in the north and south of Bakhmut on those flanks. Go back to ISW says Stupin, who is the Ukrainian spokesperson here, stated that Ukrainian forces conducted successful counterattacks near the Rozdolivka, Krasnopolivka, and Bakivka Yehidna areas. Okay, let's go and have a look at where those are. So if we have Bakhmut here, we can see that up here we have Rozdolivka and Krasnopolivka. So some pressure from the Ukrainians in this area. There's a small village called Sako Ivanseti there. I believe there's some geolocated footage the ISW says shows Russian forces having captured Sako Ivanseti as of June 14th. Geolocated footage shows that they've captured that. I mean, my understanding is that Russians have been there for some time now. The Ukrainians have been putting some pressure and taken some trench lines to the north and are attempting to take parts of Sako Ivanseti. But I'm not sure geolocated footage would show that the Russians have recaptured that. Anyway, let's have a look at what the claims are. They are here. So the video footage is some bad people are shooting at a small drone. Don't like this. So you've got drones, Ukrainian drones dropping IEDs on Russian positions, and they're being geolocated to here. Let's see if that shows any kind of marginal gains for the Russians in this area. We'll paste that in, and that is okay. Russians having some presence there, exactly where we've known they've been for some time. So again, I don't quite understand why the ISW does this. It says that Russians have made marginal gains and then geolocates footage to exactly where they've been for weeks. I mean, they captured it, yeah, but they captured it ages ago. Okay. Anyway, to continue, Russian sources claim that Ukrainian forces advanced near Klishchivka, that's to the south of Bakhmut, and conducted additional counterattacks near Ozaryanivka and Kurdyamivka. We're starting to get some explicit mention of some of these other places to the south of Bakhmut. So Bakhmut is there. Remember, in Bakhmut, I have 3 lines. So now the Russian lines are pro-Russian map of Syriac maps in red, blue is Andrew Perpetua, pro-Ukrainian, and yellow is Deep State map, pro-Ukrainian. Deep State map have a 48 to 72 hour operational security delay on their mapping that they're doing. So I'm not really concentrating too much on Deep State at the moment. They've had some marginal changes. Just here, I've adapted my map a little bit. But basically, the ISW is saying there are Ukrainian attacks in the Ozaryanivka and Kurdyamivka direction. The Russians have been pushing there as well. They lost some territory on the western side of the canal over the last week and are trying to get that back. But yeah, activity down in those southern areas. What else does the ISW tell us? Ukrainian Eastern Group of Forces spokesperson Cherevati stated that Ukrainian forces have recaptured 16 square kilometers of ground during counterattacks near Bakhmut in the past 2 weeks. And Deputy Defense Minister Malyar stated that Russian forces are transferring reserves from the Kherson direction to the Bakhmut area. That's unconfirmed, but that is what is being claimed. And unsuccessful offensive operations the Ukrainians are claiming of the Russians near Orikovo, Vasilivka, Yahidne, Bakivka, and Roslivka. So both sides are claiming that the other side is attacking in certain places. This is going back to the northern area, Orikovo, Vasilivka, and then up to the north as well in this area, as well as Bakivka. So the one bit of change that I have shown on my map now to reflect Andrew Perpetua's map is that the Ukrainians have, or at least the Russians have been pushed back a little bit to the north of this reservoir. So this reservoir, the Bakivka reservoir, is not got any water in, apart from up this end a little bit. And there are rumors that the Ukrainians have some control of land just to the north of the reservoir, and they're pressuring Berkivka from there. So the Russian line has been pushed back marginally on Andrew Perpetua's map, but no other changes from anyone else. Let's look at a few other claims about Bakhmut, and you can see here that Warmapper is saying that actually the Ukrainians have made some gains around just if I go and show you where that is. So you've got Bakhmut city here, some gains for the Ukrainians actually directly to the west of the city. So actually these gains are in this kind of area here. I'm not seeing that reflected on any of the other mappers at the moment. It could just be them catching up. But anyway, that's where they are making those claims. Southwest of Bakhmut, Ukrainians have advanced towards Klishchivka from Ivaniska. Okay. And then we look at some other sources. There is advancement in all directions of attack, about 1 kilometer on each. That's from Deputy Defense Minister Malia. I'm talking about the south as well as Bakhmut. In the Bakhmut direction, offensive operations continue near Roslivka, Krasnopolivka, Bakivka, Yahidny. And there is success there, fairly unspecified. And there are claims that the Ukrainians now are sort of in control of some of the heights around Bakhmut. Obviously, it's not huge heights; they're just sort of fairly shallow hills or not very steep hills. But that it does give you extra range on your munitions that you're firing with your equipment, and it gives you good sight of where you're firing as well. And in this case, they are firing ATGMs into Bakhmut, so anti-tank guided missiles, not necessarily against tanks or mechanized equipment, although it could be. I'm not sure. It looks more like they're firing against buildings. I've seen quite a few usages of these munitions against buildings over the last few days in Ukrainian attacks. Anyway, so there is the idea that they have the high grounds in areas around Bakhmut. Let's go and have a look at a topographical map. So this is the topographical map of Bakhmut. You've got Bakhmut there. If we zoom in quite a bit to Bakhmut, you can see that as the canal comes down here, Ukrainians are starting to gain more ground in this area, and they're attacking from Ivaniska towards Klishchivka. You can see that Klishchivka is on lower ground. There's a little bit of a bluff behind, and they're fighting over these trench lines that are in there. But the Ukrainians now appear to have this area, and then as we come up further north, they have this area under their control, and they're fighting for control over these higher grounds here. But they will have the control of these higher grounds that allow them to fire things into Bakhmut from pretty much, all of the west and the southwest as well. So anyway, that I thought that'd be useful to look at. That is the topographical map for the area. Right, so that's pretty much Bakhmut. We're going to come down to Avdiivka now. Just to remind you, I do have on this map the the lines as they were according to Deep State map for let's go and have a look at it, for the 30th of May, which is before the counterattack took place. That's in white. It's not going to be particularly relevant for this area of the map because there hasn't been too much change. Yes, a little bit around Bakhmut, but generally there won't be too much usage of this line yet unless there are significant counterattacks along the eastern front here. But it's going to be quite useful for seeing what has been achieved on the southern front around Zaporizhia. But I'll turn it off for now. Thanks so much to JR for doing that for me. Awesome stuff. Right, okay, let's have a look at Avdiivka. Not a lot of change at all in Avdiivka. Not a lot of activity. The ISW just basically says not too much. General staff reporting that Russian forces conducted unsuccessful actions near Avdiivka and Marinka. And that's that. So that is all we know really about this area. I mean, there's a marginal change on Deep State map actually for the area just south of Pervomaisky. The Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back a little bit here, but that's any time over the last sort of 48 hours that's happened. And Marinka, we heard yesterday that the Chechen forces have pulled out of Marinka, so you might see some changes there. Now, having said that, Syriac maps shows some control for the Russians improved to the south of Marinka, and we'll just go and find that on their map. So here it is, and they say that the Russian army made small advances south of Marinka. I've been talking about this small settlement of Pobieda for some time, where this is a really important settlement that stops the Russians being able to encircle Marinka, and the Ukrainians have been holding out there. But Syriac maps are the only mapper that has that part of that settlement under the control of the Russians, and they've had that for a couple of weeks now, 2 or 3 weeks, and no other mapper has that. But they are showing some gains for the Russians here, which would indicate that they might well have purchased there. I don't know. Nonetheless, I mean, I haven't really seen this talked about anywhere else, but the claim is from this pro-Russian mapper that the Russians are making some gains here in Marinka. So perhaps not having the Chechen forces fighting there won't make any difference. Although I believe they were fighting inside Marinka itself, which is pretty much an apocalyptic hellscape these days. Right, let's move on from Marinka because, as I say, other than that, there may be some gains for the Russians there. There's not too much to report. Vuhledar is a place where there's been an uptick in activity, apparently. So if we go to see what's happened there, Ukrainian army has advanced by another kilometer south of Vuhledar. There's no real details of exactly where this is. Ukrainian army is moving forward on at least 3 directions along the front lines. Russian forces' defenses are getting stretched. So this source claims. Not a great amount of detail, and I don't even think there is too much mentioned in the ISW either. So this came in. It says, in fact, it says the opposite. It says Russian forces in Shatarska, Western Donetsk direction, conducted an unsuccessful attack towards Vodyane. And they're talking about how the Russians are on the attack here, and talking about how they are possibly doing that to stretch the Ukrainian forces themselves. And because there's been so much activity around Velika Novosilka just to the west here, if the Russians attack around here, then it might force the Ukrainians to pull forces themselves over to the Vuhledar area in order that they are weakened in their attack. But actually, that ISW part of the ISW report, so the ISW gets my time reported in the evening after a day's activity. And at the moment, the Ukrainians are doing quite a lot of nocturnal activities and nighttime attacks. And it appears that Vuhledar is an area where there was news that came in very late last night after the ISW report. And so the ISW is saying the Russians are attacking towards Vodyane. And then just after that report comes out, we hear that Vuhledar, there's success for the Ukrainians around here, and they've taken a kilometer somewhere south of Vuhledar. So it seems like those are really contradictory, but I would assume that the Russians wouldn't have too much capacity to go on the offensive around Vuhledar at the moment in the way that perhaps ISW are saying there. And Ukrainians have made some gains, but we need a bit more explicit detail and confirmation of that. And then we come to the west to Velika Novosilka, where there's been all this activity now for a good week. If we turn on Russian defensive lines as of the 30th of May, we can see now that, yep, there's a little bit of change there. Now, of course, these other mappers aren't Deep State map. Deep State aren't really updating at the moment. They're not doing it very quickly. They've got that operational security lag, but you can see that there are some gains for the Ukrainians along this front line. Anyway, I'll turn that back off. I don't want too many colors to confuse you, and we'll go and look at Velika Novosilka and what the sources are telling us about that area. We'll look at the overall map for this whole southern area. You've got Donetsk front line here, and then it turns into Zaporizhia just past Velika Novosilka. We've got Heliopole, Orikhiv, and then Lobkove, which is near to the reservoir. No report says a summary of what's going on along that front. Renewed activity along the Zaporizhia front line, mainly around the Orikhiv, Roberterne area, but near Velika Novosilka, renewed fighting for Staromayorsk and Urezhainy. So we'll have a look at that on my map. So this is Staromayorsk, and Urezhainy is a smaller settlement just to the southeast of that. That was where there's fighting yesterday. It seems like it's fairly similar positions to yesterday. So not a lot of gains, even though there are general claims of gains around the area. Rebar then talks about Oleshki. I'll come to that a little bit later. Pelé-Volant's map indicates no change in territory in this particular area, and we'll see what they say about Orikhiv when we come to it a little bit later. But you can see that Ukrainians are pushing in multiple places around here. They're still trying to get hold of this place, Rivnepil, holding out on the higher ground here. The Ukrainians want to come through here so they can get a height advantage over Staromayorsk and these other settlements down the river there, as well as Novozlatopil here. They are attacking towards a number of different places. There are various claims about Novodonetsk here. That was apparently under Ukrainian control. I don't know whether it's been taken back by the Russians. So that is over here. Various claims. I assume that that's probably safely in the grey zone. Just another bit of information here. Ukrainian forces, they're doing such an explicit and successful job, from what I can work out, of taking out Russian artillery. Here, Ukrainian forces claim to have destroyed nearly an entire Russian NSTA-S self-propelled gun battery south of Velika Novosilka with counter-battery fire. So 5 out of 6 taken out, and there's lots of footage to show these. These have been geolocated to various areas. Let's just take one of them, just to give you an idea of where we're talking about here. So all around this kind of general area, there is this battery of that type of self-propelled gun, and they've taken out 5 out of 6 of them. So that's pretty significant. There is all sorts of drone activity in this area. In fact, if you look at this, I showed you this in the news piece this morning. You're starting to get hexcopters. So these have 6 sets of rotors on them, which means they can carry an awful lot more. I mean, these are big pieces of kit, as you can see from there. This guy's setting one up, and he's putting on basically a rocket-propelled grenade, RPG-7, PG-7 heat munition, and they can hold 6 of these bad boys and drop them on unsuspecting piece of kit like your artillery, and that's really having an effect on the Russian ability to hit the Ukrainians. I mean, it's counter battery fire, but with drones. But they've also got, of course, the counter battery fire working as well. Uh, what else is going on in the area? Ukrainian artillery brigade has hit an ammunition depot in Staromilnyivka. This is quite an important town because after that it becomes so here it is there. After you get your defenses and trench lines there, so it's an important place. Anyway, that's being hit with artillery, munition dumps and whatnot. So there's video footage of that. There's not a lot of movement as far as the maps are concerned in the Velika Novosilka area. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to move to the west from Velika Novosilka, and we're going to stop by Hilaypole, just down here. There is activity around Drozhnyanka. Let's see what we have. I mean, it's all a bit mixed up, this area, just to let you know. You've got this area south of Hilaypole, you've got this area south of Orikhiv, around Malotokmachka particularly, and then you've got Lobkove over here. That's been apparently liberated by the Ukrainians, although there's still some fierce fighting in and around there, I believe. Anyway, so there's going to be a mixture of claims of these different places. So in the Zaporizhia direction, this is from, I think, Wolgonzo. Yeah. The Ukrainian forces are attacking Robotyna. This is the way to the strategically important Tokmak. There is some progress. Also, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to take new positions from Drozhnyanka. This is the road to the strategically important Polohy. Russian artillery fired on Ukrainian units in Hilaypole and Krasnoye. The armed forces of Ukraine hit the positions of the Russian forces in Pyatchiki, or something similar. So what they're saying there is, Wolgonzo saying that the Russians are under pressure south of Hilaypole and south of Orikhiv, and those are both important places for the Ukrainians to attack, because it's the next step Polohy, south of Hilaypole. Next step is Tokmak, south of Orikhiv. Tokmak is very well defended. There are several lines of defenses, and then there are defenses around Tokmak, on a 360 manner. Polohy and Tokmak are consistently hit with huge amounts of munitions, HIMARS, and artillery and whatnot. So that is what Wolgonzo is talking about there. Vladimir Rogov, a Russian appointed council member of the occupied Zaporizhia region, is worried the Ukrainian activity in the Orikhiv direction has sharply increased after long artillery preparation. Infantry rushes into battle. So there's been a few days of stasis. It could be that the weather was bad. It could be that the Ukrainians are merely regrouping. They've maybe come up against some stiff opposition from the Russians. So rather than trying to trick the Russians with their own forces on the ground, which would cause them to lose a lot of troops and a lot of equipment, just sit back and let the artillery do its job, let the drones do their job, and then soften those lines up and then go again. There's no point going, oh, we've failed, we've lost a bunch of pieces of equipment, let's just keep going. It's not going to be Vuhledar 2.0 that the Russians did, which is like, I know what we'll do the same thing again and again and again and again. It's like, no, okay, we've got a bunch of artillery, we've got really capable counter battery fire, we've got quite a lot of ammunition we stockpiled, and we have drones by the thousands potentially. So let's just let them do the damage, and then hopefully we'll be able to walk in and only have to deal with things like minefields. Anyway, that would be my opinion there. Ukraine battle map says Ukrainian forces announced that they have advanced 3 kilometers in the area of Malotokmachka and retook 103 square kilometers of territory in the past week. Ukraine has likely retaken most of the green area and some of the yellow area, and it's estimated that 60 square kilometers of land was retaken in the Velika Novosilka. We've already looked at that area. So there are some gains in this Malotokmachka area. There's no talk about the dating for that, though, but there's certainly renewed pressure there. As you can see here from the Poulet-Vallon map just south of Orikhiv, the Ukrainians have made some gains here since they began. It's difficult to work out the exact time frames on these, but yeah, you can see that the Ukrainians are active there, close to Orikhiv and on the way to Robotyna there. And then we come further to the west. So activity around Drozhnyanka, activity towards Robotyna, and then we come to Lobkove. So let's look at a couple of sources here. Reports of new Ukrainian attempt from Lobkova to Vasilivsky with 24 armored vehicles. So that's come out this morning. That is to say that they are going to be moving in this direction towards Vasilivka. When I talk to you about all the different potential routes that the Ukrainians could take in the Zaporizhia frontline area for a major counteroffensive, assuming they're going to be trying to strike for Melitopol, for Berdyansk, for the coast. There are broadly three areas, and the Vasilivka area, which is the most westerly area, was seen as really important. So this is quite an important logistics route, a logistics hub, sorry, and that will allow, if the Ukrainians could get control of that, that would allow them to use a number of roads that would be really important for coming down into Zaporizhia, into southern Zaporizhia. So that we can see that that's potentially what the Ukrainians are trying out here, seeing if there's a weakness somewhere around the Lobkova area that allows them to get some inroads into the land around Vasilivka. Syriac Maps, pro-Russian mapper, says that around Lobkova there are some. It says here, actually, during the last hours, the Ukrainian army fully secured the town of Lobkova after the intensity of the battles were reduced due to the bad weather. So bad weather has affected things, and that's why potentially there was a little bit of a dip in activity over the last few days. Right, then we move on to activity that's taken place along the Dnipro River. And this is surprising because obviously we had the huge ramifications of the dam being blown. You've had flooding from Novokakhovka onwards, so flooding of this area, particularly on the left bank, this eastern bank here in the occupied region. And that you would think would stop the Ukrainians from attacking. And I think it does make it more tricky. But there's a lot of news last night that there was gunfire in Novokakhovka. Apparently, commandos had landed there. But there's also reports in Oleshki of the Ukrainians having a foothold. So that's just across from Kherson. So these two places are featuring quite a lot. Don't have too much news since then, but this is also admitted by Rebar. Says in the Kherson direction, Ukrainian troops have landed on the islands near Oleshki and have gained a foothold there. So if we go and have a look at Oleshki, that could be just some of these islands where the water has receded. I don't know exactly how much of this land is on show, given increased water levels, but around here, the Ukrainians are committing themselves to some kind of attack, and possibly around Novokakhovka. There were reports that the Ukrainian Air Force was supporting, close air support, and you would assume artillery as well. So Novokakhovka, I can see this being quite sensible because apparently the Russians have removed some of their forces from Kherson because they didn't think the Ukrainians would be able to attack across the river given the flooding, and have supported their forces elsewhere, Zaporizhia, Donetsk areas. And it could be that they've pulled a bunch of troops out from there, and now the Ukrainians are thinking, this could be a good time to attack. That could be quite clever, could be a form of adaptation for them. And that's pretty much that. I'll keep an eye on all of these places over the day, see if anything significant happens. I'll do a quick update if something large happens, but I don't think it will. I think this is going to be a much more grinding counter-offensive, given the nature of the defences in place. And we should have our expectations matching that. This is, at the end of the day, this is war, and it's not easy, and it's not always lightning quick like it was in the Kharkiv counteroffensive, where there were just no defenses, no minefields, a lack of preparation for the Russians. The Russians have had months and months to prepare here, and they've dug some serious trenches and laid some serious minefields. So it will be challenging, but the Ukrainians have committed possibly 3 brigades worth of troops and equipment out of 12. Plus. Anyway, hopefully that was useful. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.